Frederic wasn't always helpless. There was a time when he aspired to become a hero, but it seemed it wasn't meant to be. From the moment he was born, and immediately placed into the delicate swishiness of a pure silk bassinet, Prince Frederic led a life of comfort. As heir to the throne of the very wealthy nation of Harmonia, he grew up with an army of servants standing ready to pamper him in every way imaginable. While learning to crawl, he was fitted with lamb's wool knee pads to keep his baby-soft skin from getting scuffed. When he wanted to play hide-and-seek, butlers and valets would hide in the most obvious places, behind a feather, under a napkin, so that the boy wouldn't have to work too hard to find them. Pretty much anything young Frederic could have wanted or needed was handed to him on a silver platter. Literally. The only thing Frederic had to do in return was live the life of a proper gentleman. He was allowed to attend as many poetry readings, ballroom dances, and 12-course luncheons as he wanted, but he was forbidden to take part in any activity that could be considered remotely risky or dangerous. Appearances were very important to Frederic's father, King Wilberforce, who vowed that no one in his family would ever again suffer the cruel mockery that had been heaped upon his great-grandfather, King Charles the Chicken-poxed. "Not a scar, not a bruise, not a blemish," was the motto of King Wilberforce, and he went to extreme measures to keep his son away from anything that might give him so much as a scratch. He even had Frederic's pencils pre-dulled. For most of his early years, Frederic was perfectly happy to skip out on pastimes like tree climbing, twisted ankles, hiking, poison ivy, or embroidery, pointy needles. King Wilberforce's warnings about the hazards of such endeavors sank in good and deep, but at the tender age of 7, Frederic was inspired to try something daring. He was in his private classroom, being taught to write his name with fancy curlicue letters, when a commotion down the hall caused his tutor to cut the lesson short. Frederic followed his tutor down to the palace gates, where many of the servants had gathered to gawk at a visiting knight. The old warrior, who was battered and exhausted from a recent bout with a dragon, had staggered up to the palace seeking food and shelter. The king invited the weary visitor inside. This was the first knight Frederic had ever seen in real life, and, frankly, even the ones he'd read about in books weren't very exciting. His favorite bedtime story was Sir Bertram the Dainty and the Quest for the Enchanted Salad Fork. During the knight's short stay, a fascinated Frederic followed him everywhere, listening to his tales of ogre battles, goblin wars, and bandit chases. There was a look in the man's eyes that Frederic had never seen before. Frederic could sense the knight's thirst for thrills, his yearning for action. The knight was a man who thrived on adventure the way Frederic thrived on tea cakes. That evening, after the knight departed, Frederic asked his father if he could take sword-fighting lessons. The king dismissed his request with a smile. "Swords are sharp, my boy, and I need a son with both ears attached." Young Frederic was undaunted. The next day he asked his father if he could take a shot at wrestling instead. King Wilberforce shook his head. "You're what they call petite, Frederic. You'd have your spine snapped in an instant." The day after that, Frederic requested a spot on the jousting team. "That's more dangerous than the other two combined," the king moaned disapprovingly. "You'll be skewered like a cocktail weenie." "Archery?" Frederic asked. "Eyes poked out," the king insisted. "Martial arts?" "Bones broken." "Mountaineering?" "Eyes broken, bones poked out." By the end of the week, King Wilberforce couldn't take it anymore. He needed to put a stop to Frederic's thrill-seeking dreams. He decided to set his son up for a fall. "Father, can I try spelunking?" Frederic asked eagerly. "Cave exploration? You'll fall into a bottomless pit," the king chided. Then he changed his tone. "But you can try animal training if you'd like." "Really?" Frederic was stunned and thrilled. "You mean with wild animals, not hamsters or goldfish?" The king nodded. "You don't think I'll be eaten alive?" Frederic asked. "Oh, I fear that you will, but if you're so determined to put your life at risk, perhaps I shouldn't stand in your way," his father said, weaving his deception. The next day, with his heart racing, Frederic was led down a winding basement corridor to a storeroom in which all the old coats of arms